My name's Cerri and I'm a health visiting manager in Anglesey. I've been asked here today to discuss with you really the implementation of the routine inquiry in the health visiting service on Anglesey. So, sorry, I don't do this very often, so I've just lost. In the next half an hour, I'm going to quickly go through really how the ACE routine inquiry came about, the planning and the consultation phase, the toolkit that was produced that gave the guidance and the approach to the health visitors, the concerns that were raised by staff and whether these were realised or not, the recommendations, and closing with a conclusion. So to quickly cover the background really, because I think Katie has done much of this work for me. You all know that ACEs, really everybody in this room knows that it's a very topical subject at the moment, and we all know that there's growing recognition of the long-term impact on children. Public Health Wales have undertaken studies into them, publishing reports on the impact of ACEs on health through health-harming behaviours. And of course, tackling ACEs is a priority across the country, really, where Wales, this is recognised in lots of their documents, where they're committed really to creating an ACE-aware public service that looks more at prevention and avoiding ACEs and making our families more resilient to improve the life outcomes of our children. So to go back to Anglesey then, the drive towards an ACE. Sorry, the initial drive for the pilot came really from Anglesey County Council's, the local authorities' drive towards an ACE-aware community on the island. And that wasn't just to include their own services, which is usually social services, education. They wanted to include all other services that dealt with children. So they brought in health, the police and other voluntary sectors. And many of these representatives from these services were present within a children's partnership meeting, where the Assistant Area Director for Children's Services for Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board raised the possibility really of an ACE routine inquiry within the health visiting service. She felt that health visitors were best placed to do this because health visitors have a long-term relationship with families. They're there with them from the antenatal period right up until the preschool stage. So it's a long-term professional relationship that is established over many years. And she felt that we were best placed to deal with raising parental awareness of ACEs, their prevalence, and letting them know about the impact so that we could try and prevent this intergenerational transmission that is associated. So the aim of the routine inquiry was to explore the acceptability of an ACE routine inquiry, not just with service users, but with the health visitors as well. So the planning stage really started with us meeting up with Andrew Bennett, who was a public health consultant that was employed by the local authority. So us as health managers met up to discuss, and Public Health Wales, like Katie said, was brought in as an independent to independently evaluate the work. But the design and the delivery was driven mainly by us, which was the health board, and Andrew Bennett himself from the local authority. We did seek advice on the appropriate research process that we should take, and we had to consult the research and development and clinical effectiveness departments of the health board. And following clarity on the proof of concept and the evaluation, we moved ahead really with the service evaluation. Data collection also was another one that we looked at, and we had quite a lengthy discussion about. The health visiting records within Wales still remain paper records, so that there was a lot of discussion as how we would collect this data. So eventually we decided that we would set up an IT database. We had to give one administrative staff member all this work to undertake herself so that we could ensure that we would maintain client anonymity throughout. So the consultation started really, and bringing staff on board is vital to the success of any pilot study, as I'm sure you'll understand. So we involved the health visitors across Anglesey much earlier really than when the pilot started on the 1st of September 2017. So this included all health visitors, including the generic and the Flying Start health visitors. I don't know if you're aware of the health visiting service in Wales, but there's two effective services running alongside each other. The generic service, which offers the Healthy Child Wales programme to everyone, and then we have the Flying Start service, which is a much more intensive health visiting service with a much more frequent visiting contact pattern within the first year of life especially, and they're in the more deprived areas of Wales. So in those first few meetings, we as managers and Andrew Bennett drafted up supporting materials that we could use to guide the health visitors in the inquiry. From there, we moved on into a training session. Of course, the health visitors were already trained in ACEs, they were very much aware, but this was again to reiterate ACEs and to give them the reason, the purpose and the rationale for the ACE routine inquiry. Within that meeting, they were also presented with the draft materials, and they did contribute a lot towards these materials. They softened some of the questions because they thought they were a little bit too direct, and they also gave us their concerns really, so that our document, our guidance for them was fit for purpose because they could use them. And to us also the guidance made sure that there was quality and uniformity in the way it was delivered, as well as giving them guidance on how to proceed. From there, we then had an implementation, so a second training session with the health visitors, where they went through the key steps and they were presented with the final toolkit. The mid-implementation or the feedback session was in the middle of the pilot, where we could find out if there was any problems, any concerns at that stage, and also so that they could bring back anything that they had found as a difficulty that we could answer them. This was a really useful session really, because we found that lots of their concerns were much more alleviated towards this stage, and they did give themselves supervision really, because they tended to answer their own concerns. And then of course there was the final feedback session at the end. So the toolkit that was used, I can't share these with you because they're not mine to share, but generally this is what it looked like. The tool was produced bilingually because Anglesey remains primarily a Welsh-speaking area. We did consider translating into other languages, but within health visiting there is many tools used. And generally we use translation services when there are communication barriers, so it's only translated into Welsh and English. So to quickly summarise the toolkit for you then, the first one was the ACE client information leaflet. So this was given out to all clients at either the antenatal or the birth visit. And this was really just to prepare them for the routine inquiry. So it told them what ACEs was, how common they were, what was the impact of ACEs, what could be done to prevent them, and how could they find out any more about ACEs. The second part of the tool really was the health visitor's guide, and this was a comprehensive guide that included introduction to ACEs again. It highlighted the rationale for it, and there was the 4 stages of the approach that was broken down for them. And there was also all the resources here, so it was guidance really on all levels, including documentation. The ACE approach then was summarised really into 4 stages within a staff prompt card, and this was laminated and every health visitor had one within their diary. This ensured again that they had guidance with them within the house in order to make sure that they could carry this out as sensitively as possible really. The ACE questionnaire itself consisted of 9 questions, And it was an exhaustive list of ACEs, and this was clarified to the family when we were there with them, really. It was broken down into looking at ACEs within the household, within the environment, and direct harm. And it was a questionnaire that was completed mainly by mums, and but also could be completed by the health visitors. But generally, most of them were completed, and that allowed really for us to include any parents with learning difficulties or the Directory of Local and National Support Services was created mainly because the health visitors felt that it should be given to everyone. It included local and national organisations and a directory really that they could, and everybody had one of these. And the final bit really was the short 5-minute animated film. The questionnaire, just to go back to it quickly really as well, that it allowed the fact that it was a questionnaire and that it wasn't mandatory, it wasn't something that they had to, so it's much easier to decline in the form of a questionnaire. And also it allowed also this controlled disclosure, because sometimes it's much easier to have that space to answer something if something's not asked directly to you. So the approach itself was broken down, like I said, into 4 simple stages so that the messages could be delivered sensitively. So the first one was to explain, obviously, that we were there to raise awareness of ACEs and their impact, and that they were events that directly affected us as children and our children while we were growing up. And knowing about ACEs can help parents to give their children the best start in life. And how they parent now is important for the future. The second stage was obviously to ask if they wanted to complete this short questionnaire, and all parents were being offered this opportunity, and that it was a way of helping us to understand and support them better. The third stage was the listening stage, and this was the stage after the questionnaire had been completed. And the health visitors were very much aware that this was never meant to be a screening or an assessment tool. It was meant to be a discursive tool and to open up important conversations, really. So again, it was reflective questioning that was encouraged to ask them how did they think that these childhood experiences had affected them, because these experiences actually could be positive too, and some of them said that it had made them stronger as a person. How did you think that their ACEs had affected their parenting? If they were unwilling to discuss, that was respected, and we'd let them know that they could complete the questionnaire at another time, and that there was open access to the health visiting service if they wanted to. If there was a high score saying they were fine, which quite often seemed to be the case, they were also encouraged at this stage to reflect on how did they think that they had protected themselves and how did they get through those difficult times. If anyone didn't want to complete the questionnaire or to talk, that was obviously understood that would be respected at all times. And the final stage was, of course, closing, thanking them for taking the time, and if they had been affected anyway, to please to call the health visitor. They were given the leaflets with support services, and if anybody had disclosed within that consultation, they were to ask them if there was anybody there to support them this evening. Any disclosure where there was concerns, there was obviously to offer support and signpost as was needed. So when did the routine inquiry take place? Well, Katie's already mentioned, really. Within the initial meeting with Andrew Bennett, the initial thought was that this would be carried out with the midwifery service, but the midwifery service felt that their clinical contacts were really already overwhelmed, and the staffing levels didn't really allow for them to undertake the routine inquiry. We as a service also wondered whether we should introduce it in the antenatal stage, but because the generic service didn't offer an antenatal contact to everyone within the service, only for the primates. We felt that it wasn't a suitable time to undertake the inquiry then either. The next routine contact that's covered by both services is at the birth visit. Again, this has just got too many clinical duties and health promotion to carry out. So the next contact after that was the 6-week contact, and that is essentially why the routine inquiry was taken out at the 6-week contact. However, in hindsight, it proved to be quite an effective time, really, because antenatally, lots of people are quite entwined in delivery and thinking about delivery. And at the birth visit, and very early on, it's that they're coming to terms with parenting. There's lots of family about. So the 6-week contact did serve as a good contact time. Also, it is followed by the 8, the 12 and the 16 follow-up contact. So the health visitors, if they felt that was needed from their professional judgment, could discuss any issues with these parents. The next routine in contact after that was the 6 months contact, and that's when the outcome questionnaire was completed, and the comparison group had the 2 questionnaires. And anybody who had declined the initial questionnaire at 6 weeks could be offered it again at this stage. Guidance on record keeping was that at the 6-week or any relevant contact really where the routine inquiry had undertaken, where to document that the routine inquiry had been offered, that the mother had agreed or declined to undertake the inquiry, the ACE score itself, which the questionnaire provided, any additional information from that visit would just be recorded as per NMC and all Wales record keeping guidance, and the questionnaire itself would then be filed in the family section of the health visiting records. So what was the initial response by the health visitors? Well, I have to be perfectly honest with you, not many of them were very happy initially. There was lots of grunts and groans, wasn't there, Katie? I know you weren't present then. The Healthy Child Wales programme had just been introduced as well, which changed a lot of their caseloads, their documentation, everything. So this was just another complexity that they just didn't want to undertake. The main concerns were around these 5 areas really, and the first one was the emotional impact, not just on client users but on them as well. These are staff members that are health trained, that they have a lot of experience of emotional health and perinatal mental health, but they felt that perhaps they didn't have the training to deal with childhood trauma and the effect that would have on them as well. Then there was obviously the workload, this impact that this questionnaire would have at 6 weeks, the documenting after that, and they thought that there would be lots of listening that would needed to be done and signposting afterwards. Child protection concern was another one that, again, this is something that we do very, very often, and it coincided with the following point really, that they felt that this may bring up child protection concerns, and because they had to do something about it then, that would in some way impact on their relationship with these clients. And we had to reassure them really, because one of the questions that was raised was if I'm completing a questionnaire and then sexual abuse is disclosed by a father, and that now grandfather is very present within this house, we had to reassure them that regardless of in what capacity these child protection concerns had been raised and what tool was being used, it didn't change their professional obligation or their duties in any way, and to follow the same routine child protection procedures. And another question really was how ACEs could be discussed without making clients feel so these ACEs that these parents had experienced as children may in some way be predisposing them to being bad parents or parents that weren't as good as other parents. These concerns, as from the pilot, were unrealised really. From the service user's point of view, they showed no distress. There was no reports of distress throughout the routine inquiry. There was an overwhelming positive client view of the ACE inquiry within the outcome questionnaires, and nearly 68% said that the support that they had received from their health visitor had actually improved as a result of the inquiry, and that this had been the first time that they had been given that opportunity to discuss their ACEs with a health professional. From the health visitor's point of view, again, Practitioners did become happier as we progressed, really. Once they'd been given the training and the resources and they'd had these feedback sessions and they become much more skilled in their approach, they did become less concerned. They were happier that it didn't deviate from normal practice. The questionnaire was incorporated into routine contact at 6 weeks. They also felt that the routine inquiry, the fact that it was routine and that it was offered to everyone, was significant for client engagement. And that the questionnaire generally was quite a quick and efficient tool, a discursive tool that could be used. They did feel that it had improved their understanding of families because health visitors, ACEs, isn't particularly a new thing. We've been aware for a long time that childhood experiences affect us as children. These things are disclosed to us, but generally over a longer period of time. We do have people that describe traumas that they have to us, but this, in a way, was a questionnaire that brought these things to the fore much earlier. So they felt that perhaps that it was framed as an investment for the future because it was brought to the fore earlier. The Family Resilience Assessment tool that was introduced with the Healthy Child Wales programme also asks about ACE. There's one question within it that asks them to score them with regards to ACEs, really. And they felt that this was one question that was really much more complex than that. And this questionnaire actually provided them with the information to make a much more accurate assessment within that section of the freight tool. So in effect, it wasn't that much of a burden on their time. It did challenge health visit assumptions. Lots of the reports were coming back saying that they were going into some houses thinking there definitely would be ACEs here and there wasn't. And others where they would never have thought there had been, and they didn't just have one, but a cumulative ACEs. So there was this feeling of this much greater openness, and there was no increased signposting. Most people had dealt with their trauma. Some had said that they would seek support later on when they felt that they needed to, and that they would contact the health visitor at that time. There was 2 or 3 that did result in a lengthier listening session afterwards. But it was acknowledged really by the staff that this was normal. This is something that occurs within health visitor practice. There are times when you go in and you're thinking you're going to do it routine, but there's something that's disclosed to you. So they didn't feel that this increased in any way, and there certainly was no increased signposting from it. And another thing that was mentioned as well, that they felt the service users did understand the link that they were trying to make, and that they then would want to look at and to try to parent differently in the future. There were, of course, recommendations, and the first one was the inefficient process for the data collection, and this is mainly, again, due to the paper records that we did need improved IT and scanning facilities. They commented on the lack of flexibility in when they could administer this questionnaire, because they had to complete it generally at the 6 weeks or the 6 months contact, where they felt there should be a much more closer look at their professional judgment, because they felt that sometimes it is more appropriate antenatally. Others, 6 weeks was the ideal time to undertake it, because it was that time when things had slowed down and that they could listen to and talk about parenting. Where others, they felt they needed to establish a little bit more of a relationship, because some days when you walk in, the whole family and the children next door are in there as well, so it's not so easy to carry out an ACE questionnaire. So they wanted that flexibility, that they could use their professional judgment in order to do that between perhaps the antenatal and the 6 month stage. They did feel it should have included mothers under 18 and, of course, fathers, partners or any carers. We had initially thought of including fathers, but the complexity, and in order to ensure that anonymity, we decided not to at that stage. So, to conclude really, it's just that they did become a very much ACE-aware workforce. They were very much ACE-aware before, but their levels of ACE awareness was very much heightened. And they did seem to understand this aim that they were trying to do, to improve the resilience and to let them know, how they could change some of the things to improve the life outcomes of their children. It was seen as a discursive tool that opened up extremely important conversations. It improved understanding of families, and it assisted individuals as well, clients, to reflect on their childhood and to understand the positive impact from their current circumstances and perhaps maybe to try and make changes to them now. It enabled focused intervention when that was required. And a lot of the feedback at the end really was that the health visitors were saying how well placed they are, how privileged we are that these people divulge so much personal information to us, and that we truly should be letting them know, making them much more aware of these ACEs, their prevalence and the impact that they are having, so that perhaps that we could stop this intergenerational transmission. Because as a health visiting service, we have this regular, mandatory in some ways, contact with them, like I said, over a 5-year period. And they felt that that also allowed for that ongoing support after this stage, so that people could come back to them maybe a year or two later and say, yes, I think I do want to discuss them now with you, I do want support with it now. So generally, it was very positive findings. And it is being looked at to be extended to see if it's transferable into other areas of Wales, into other health visiting services, looking at much larger urban areas and addressing some of those recommendations that they highlighted. And that was highlighted within the inquiry. Thank you very much for listening. So I think the questions are to be reserved to the end of the session. So, and I think there is a break now, is there? I'll just hand you back.